My name is Kenneth Russell. I'm a Christian Ministries major here at Indiana Wesleyan, and I'm class of 2013. I really love this campus, and so one way I was able to get plugged in with the campus jobs. And so for me, I was able to be an admissions associate for the admissions office the last 3 years. This gave me the opportunity to host students for chapel and for lunches, and also give campus tours where I was able to tell people how much I love this campus and how much it's impacted me. Indiana Wesleyan is a very unique place. It's a community in which you can have the opportunity to address your instructors not only as professor or as doctor, but also as brother, sister, aunt, uncle, and in some cases, mom and pop. And that's been my experience. One of those professors for me has been Dr. Chris Bounds. He's the theology professor here. It's been very special for me and very important for me to have someone who's not only grading my papers, but also praying with me, and someone who I can talk to about life, about marriage, about money. How do you buy a house? Tell me about your struggles. How do I make it through life? It has been something that's been very beneficial for me. One unique thing that I've had the opportunity to participate in is one-on-one research with some of my professors. Right now, I'm working on a Charles Wesley letter and a John Wesley letter. We're working on what's the context, who is he talking to, why is he talking to him, why did he even write this at all? To better prepare for that, I'm actually having the opportunity to study at Oxford for the summer. And so I'll be learning from the top-notch scholars in the world on contextual criticism and historical documents. And so from there, being able to work with my professors and to write a publication that'll be featured in a museum. Indiana Wesleyan has a twofold approach to their education. They have the classrooms, but then they also have the practicum experiences. For example, pastoral care and counseling, where we actually got the opportunity to go sit with the sick and pray with the elderly and go do a lot of different visitations. Another example would be evangelism and global outreach. For that class, I had the opportunity to partner with the church and put on an event that reached out to my local community. From these practicum experiences, as well as what I've learned in the classroom, I feel very confident to go out into ministry and fulfill God's call for my life.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, hello, how are you?
Doing great. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm going to get in trouble if I don't say this. I know we're live right now, but Andrea, my wife, says hello. So I just want to let you know that. So got that out of the way.
Andrea.
So we're good there. But yeah, so glad that you're here. And we're just going to jump right into this. You wrote a book that dealt with your own experience, your own testimony when it came to like doubt and identity, where God's leading, kind of this calling, and how you've really through it found it to be really a formational time in your life. And you actually write in one of your books, and you quote, you describe actually C.S. Lewis via his picture of Aslan, that a God I could not pin down, you say, could not predict, but was forced nonetheless to trust despite the wreck he led me into. In the end, I found a future, an identity fuller, richer, deeper, and more authentic than I could have bought, borrowed, or scraped together on my own. Can you describe for those that are watching right now just that experience, how you felt in that time?
Well, it's funny because I think this process of encountering faith and doubt is a recursive process, right? Like it's not a linear, we have doubts and we deal with them and then we, find our way back into certainty again, and then we're fine for the rest of our lives. I think life is messy and it's nuanced, and it has a way of reintroducing doubt back again into our lives. And so I think at each stage, every time we come back around to it again, we are a little bit changed. Our relationship with Christ is a little bit different. And so each sort of cycle through doubt, again, I think is an opportunity to re-engage our faith and re-engage the presence of God.
Right. You say that this idea of being engaged with God, how is it possible then to doubt and believe at the same time?
Well, I think it really begins with having to shift our perspective of faith and doubt. And I love, there's a play, a Pulitzer Prize-winning play called Doubt by John Patrick Shanley, and I used to teach it in my literature classes. And I love at the beginning, he does this prologue where he says, our culture has shifted into a courtroom culture. We've moved away from discussion and dialogue and have moved into debate and a power of wills, and we want judgment and verdict and proof. And I think C.S. Lewis talks about this in his book, God in the Dock, where we put God on the stand and we say, explain yourself, God. Convince me, why I should believe in you and why I should put my trust in you. And I think as people of faith and as people who are trying to walk faithfully with Christ, we need to recenter and we need to shift and push back against that cultural norm of a courtroom culture. And we need to realize that doubt is not actually the opposite of faith. Doubt is the seed of faith. Doubt is really where faith can begin. Doubt is, Shanley says, an invitation to re-enter the present again. And I think we have to come back to a place of realizing that faith and doubt necessarily aren't even two sides of the same coin. They are the same fibers in the trunk that is the tree of a life with Christ. I love how this French mathematician named Henri Poincaré once said, to doubt everything or to believe everything are two equally convenient solutions because both dispense with the necessity for reflection. And I think as ministers and pastors and practitioners, we need to come back to this place of dialogue and discussion and recenter around the truth that faith is not actually about certainty. Faith is about reflection.
Yeah, that's profound. Man, we could be done right now. That's great. That's so great. From your experience, how has making commitments in the face of unanswered and unanswerable questions made you more mature spiritually?
Well, it's interesting that you ask me that, and I think I want to answer it with a story, if I can, because, I talked about faith and doubt are this sort of recursive process, and I find myself again in a season where my faith is being tested. And this last July, our family moved from South Central Pennsylvania up to Southern Ontario. My husband, Dwayne and I are both missionary kids, but he's Canadian, and he got a job here at a university in the area. And so we moved last summer and came here. And at the time that we moved, my calling is writing, my vocation is teaching. And I was a professor, I was writing, I was, taking care of the kids. And I really had this I was thriving in all of these areas. And in moving here, it required me to sort of put my vocation aside. And I've been in a season of, here in this new place, my vocation, I know what it is, but it has no real expression in this new home. I can't work yet. I'm going through the immigration process. It'll probably be another year or so. And so I've had a lot of emotions. There's been a lot of struggling with it. As you all know, vocation is tied deeply to our sense of identity, and my vocation is tied deeply to my sense of calling. And so I've been wrestling with that. Well, after Christmas, I finally, through this whole season, I told Dwayne, I kept telling him, I think I'd be able to handle this sort of transition and loss if it just weren't that God were so quiet. I feel like he has taken his comfort away from me, and I don't understand it. And that was making me feel like adding insult to injury. I was really struggling with hurt over that. And so finally, after Christmas, I thought, God, you and I, we have some work to do. I need to wrestle with you, and I need you to answer some questions for me. And so I took a day alone with God in our church here. We found a wonderful church here. They gave me a room just for the day of prayer and reflection and writing. And the question for me that really came out of that whole day was, God, who are you to me in this season? And I kept pushing into that question and bringing it to God and saying, Lord, who are you to me in this season? And the answer I got was, Christin, I am a quiet God to you in this season. And I did not like that answer. I still don't like that answer. But see here, this is where I think faith has to carry us, right? Because if I am going to believe that my God is a personal God who loves me and cares for me, then I have to believe that his quietness is as much a gift as his comfort. And so I think that's the space that I'm sort of living into right now. And I think that's, when we talk about faith and doubt, faith isn't faith without having to believe difficult things, right? And we all have difficult things we have to believe, whether it's in the virgin birth or the resurrection of Jesus, whether it's these miracles or whether it's something deeply personal and psychological, like believing that we serve a God who is intimately involved in human history despite the atrocious evil that we see going on around us, right? Definitely. Faith asks us to believe difficult things, and I think that's where doubt opens the door for us to press into who God is.
Wow, that's very affirming and encouraging. You mentioned these ideas of how we deal with faith and doubt individually. How, for you, in your experience, how does community, and not being in isolation or alone, I think that's one danger too, is that a lot of times doubt, we retreat and we become closed in. But as you've been talking, there's people that have entered into your life that I think have helped you with this process. So how does community play a part in working through doubt and finding God in faith? And how does someone find freedom and trust in these types of environments?
Well, I think as the body of Christ, as the church, as people who are pastoring and shepherding hearts and souls and minds, we have to, again, start to realize that doubt is actually an opportunity and an opening. We have to create a culture in our communities of faith where doubt is not threatened. You know, when we live in a courtroom culture, doubt becomes a threat to our certainty. And we have to, reframe that and look at it as doubt as an opportunity for growth. And I'll return to John Patrick Shanley and his prologue before the play Doubt. He writes, "When a man feels unsteady, when he falters, when hard-won knowledge evaporates before his eyes, he's on the verge of growth." And I think we have to realize that doubt is soft ground. Doubt is the places where we can actually root down deeper and start to grow. And I often think of our friend. We had a friend when we were living in Los Angeles who was struggling with his faith. He had a lot of questions. And one day he invited Dwayne and I out to lunch because he just wanted to air out his questions and his uncertainties. And as he was talking, I had this moment of realization where I thought, you know, none of these questions are threatening to God. None of his doubt and his uncertainty is threatening to God. In fact, I almost believe God has placed it in him to lead him back to himself.
Wow.
And so we ended that day really with no answers for Drew, except, Drew, be faithful to the questions. Be faithful to them. Follow them because they'll lead you to the heart of God. And I think I'll end on this note that I think of C.S. Lewis's book, Until We Have Faces.
But we want to go straight into some of our listener questions. Geraldine Boguer asked, is doubt equal to questioning?
Oh, that is a great question. I think questions definitely are a part of doubt. And I think questions are the beginning place for a lot of growth. But it's interesting to think of doubt as being not necessarily questions, right? But maybe being a place that we're sort of hovering for a little while. I don't know if I have a great answer for that.
Well,
sorry.
No, that's great. Ben Thomas asked, in your experience, has the church been a community that invites healthy doubting? If not, how do we invite that healthy doubting?
Yeah, I think unfortunately not. I love the church, and I think the church has been a place where I've grown, but unfortunately, I think it's a place where all too often we buy into the sort of larger culture that teaches us that we have to be certain, and that certainty is the foundation of faith. And therefore, we feel threatened by doubt. We feel threatened by people who ask questions. We feel threatened by things that shift our foundation. But I think God wants to invite us into, as a community, as his bride, into a more stable place of relationship with him, where just like he is unthreatened by doubt and questions, we aren't threatened either, but we see it as an opportunity to press into the presence of God and to learn and grow. I think it's his tool for, like we're talking about spiritual formation, I think doubt and questions are God's tool to invite us into growth.
That's great. You mentioned you had a friend that was dealing with doubt, and how you and your husband came around your friend and just loved through that time. We've also been talking about doubt mainly from your perspective. How have you been able to, maybe speaking of the experience with your friend, have come alongside others to help them in that process, kind of entering into their space to form or to disciple them through this idea of doubt?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to let people know that, again, it's okay. It's okay to ask these questions. There's probably a lot of shame around feeling this doubt, that somehow they're less than, they're not as faithful because they have these uncertainties. And I think when you're with someone who's in that place of just opening the door and being equally supportive and also challenging. Supportive in saying, your questions are welcome here. They're not going to threaten me. I'm not, emotionally invested in them, but I care about you and I care about seeing you move forward. And so I think in a practical way, it's learning to ask questions that push them to reflect. So things like, well, what do you want to keep about your faith through this season of doubt? What do you want to keep? What do you find valuable about a life of faith and a life lived with Jesus, right? Like pushing them to reflect through that.
Yeah, so really you're guiding them, you're helping them through this process, you're setting them on a trajectory, but you're coming alongside with. Not just you meet with and you judge, or you're coming inside, and saying, no, you need to move to this side. Yeah.
And I think it's important to say we need to avoid, because see, other people's doubt can make us uncomfortable and can make us want to fix, right? And give an answer. And I think we need to avoid that and really embrace the reality that if we give people an answer, we're sort of stealing God's opportunity to help them learn. And so it's not about fixing the problem for them. It is the process in which they are learning to embrace these questions and press into their own answers, that God is growing them. And we don't want to sabotage that. So we want to come alongside them and work with God in that and help them reflect a little more clearly on what they're going through.
That's a great point, especially in the culture we live in.
Yeah.
It's such a great point to come alongside with people like, for sure. Well, thank you so much for being with us, and sorry for the glitch there, but man, this is so awesome, so rich, and a lot of information and wisdom. How can people, because I know I have a lot more questions I'd like to ask you, how can people get a hold of you, whether it's online, maybe social media?
Yes, I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter at Shipwrecked in LA. But also you can go to my website, ChristinTaylor.com, and there's a contact link there where you can contact me, and it goes directly to my personal email. So I will get it and write back.
Well, awesome. Well, thanks so much again for being with us. Appreciate the time.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about this. I love it.
You're welcome. Tony Heath, send it back to you.